Hi, my name is Danielle Porter, and I am a nutrition counselor and health and wellness coach. And I wanted to talk to you today a little bit about nutrition labels and ingredients. That is a subject that I am incredibly passionate about. My thesis for my master's degree was all about whole food nutrition and food marketing and all of that kind of stuff. So I'm really excited to be able to bring this lesson to you guys today and kind of condense a whole lot of information into one concise package. So we're going to talk specifically about nutrition labels, and then we're also going to be talking about ingredients. So I have some of my favorite items here, and I think that this is best served if you think about the things in your home that you eat very regularly, and then when you go home today, I want you to take some of the things out of your pantry and out of your fridge and take a look at them, because there's a lot to be had on the nutrition label and in the ingredients. So let's go ahead and get started. I think a lot of us have a very low level base knowledge of what goes on a package. You know, there's the front, there's the back. Here, I'll grab one of these just to peanut butter, right? There's the front, the side, the back, all of this stuff has information. And what I typically tell my clients is the front of a package is meant to sell you the item. This is meant to tell you about the item. So in my ideal world, all of the grocery stores, the shelves would be lined with packages that look like this rather than like this, because this is bright and bold and makes you want to buy this item. That's why there's even a science that goes behind where things are placed on shelves, how they're turned, the colors that make you want to buy something. It's really, really important to be a well-informed consumer. And so I'm hoping today that I can help you learn how to become a little more informed in making choices. And next time when you go to the grocery store, whether that's on your own, by yourself, or with your parents, that you are consciously making a better choice than before. I do not advocate for going home and gutting your pantry and being like, we're doing everything new, because those kind of changes don't last. What really lasts is slow, methodical change, small changes over time. Just a heightened awareness about what it is that you're consuming and putting into your body and what you're filling your pantry and your fridge with. So let's go ahead and get started with the nutrition label. I am going to grab, this is a box of corn muffin mix, right? Just about everybody in America has this box in their pantry somewhere. But we are going to talk a little bit about the nutrition facts on this, because I think the nutrition label is a very important thing. I'm actually going to end in ingredients and sneak peek, spoiler alert. That's actually the most important part. But I do want to cover this because I think that it's very, very important that we understand that a lot of regulation, federal regulation, goes into what goes on this. There's been a lot in probably the last 5 to 10 years of revamping this to make it more accessible to consumers, because so many people claim ignorance, that they just don't know. They don't know how to make better choices. The packaging lied to them. And it's really important that these kind of things are true, but also that you understand what it is that you're looking at. Because as great as it is for you to see a big bold calories and a big bold trans or total fat and cholesterol and sodium and total carbohydrates and protein, unless you know how that all works together in your body during a meal, it's really just numbers and letters on a package. So the first thing we're actually going to start up here, because this is really, really, really important. The serving size, because all of this information is based off of this. A lot of people, I wish this wasn't backwards for you guys, but a lot of people see the calories and they see the fat and the sodium and they're like, okay, well, this has 160. 160 for what? That's not 160 when it's all said and done and cooked. It's 180. And it's not the whole thing. It's 1/4 cup of the mix. So that would be, this says per 1/4 cup mix is 160 calories. There are 6 servings per container. So this 180, so if you baked this, it tells you to bake it in a corn muffin, so 6 to 8 muffins. This is 1/6 of whatever is cooked. And so that's a really easy way for you to start looking at your food and your portion sizes and to really understand what it is that you're consuming and how much of it you're consuming. Because 180 calories is what is in 1/6 of what this box makes, right? Same thing for this. So 190 calories in this Skippy Naturals creamy peanut butter. That is for a 2 tablespoon serving. So you're going to decide if this fits your personal consumption. And I know for some people, personal consumption isn't a big deal. You're just like, well, I just had some peanut butter. But until you really start understanding what a real portion of peanut butter looks like, it's not this. It's this. And most people don't eat 2 tablespoons of peanut butter. That's a dipping size. If you're going to be spreading it on a piece of toast or on crackers or something like that, you're most likely going to be using 1 tablespoon rather than 2 tablespoons. So you just need to understand a little bit of math, not a ton. But so if you only had 1 tablespoon of this, that would be half of 190, which is 185, just in case, right? Let me check my math. I don't have my calculator here. So, okay, let's move on from this. Next on the list, oh, and just to let you know, calories, not bad. I could really, really get deep. This is like my love, my like heart and soul and love is explaining this kind of thing and explaining what matters and what matters the most and what matters the least. And while calories are very important, it's actually not recommended to just eat super low calorie things. A lot of times, super low calorie things don't have a lot of nutrients in them. And we'll get into that when we talk about ingredients a little bit further. But this really has to do, calories are just energy. They're a measurement of energy. And so if you see international packaging, sometimes it says something else. Joules of energy, or there's all different kinds of ways to say it, but calories are energy. I mean, just think of it that way. So sometimes energy can be burned very quickly, and sometimes energy takes a while to burn. And again, that's where we're going to get down here into the ingredients. But just for time's sake, we're going to talk about this without being made. So that's just 160 is if you just ate the powder, which obviously we're not just eating the powder, right? Okay, so total fat is trans fat, saturated fat, monosaturated fat, all of the different kinds of fats, which I'm assuming you're going to be talking about in your class, but all of the different kinds of fats totaled together. That's an important number because it is important that we aren't eating not enough fat, because fat helps you grow. Fat fuels your brain. Your body also runs off of fat, but you don't want to eat too much, and you don't want to eat a lot of highly processed fat. And that's where the saturated fat comes into, and that's where the trans fats come into. The things that are not naturally based, that were man-made in a factory, in a laboratory, to add to something, to make it taste better, to make you want it more. Because remember, at the end of the day, food manufacturers' goal is to sell you this box of product. It is not for your health. Even health food, guys, I hate to break it to you, but even health food manufacturers have to sell you that, right? Like every business's business model is built on product and revenue. And so everything that's going to go into this box and everything that's going to be on the outside of this box is to sell you the product. And so it's up to you to become an informed consumer about what it is that you're buying so that you can make educated choices, right? So a lot of times, and we're going to talk about some hidden things, especially when we get down into the ingredients, but a lot of times you can see that here on this nutrition label. So that's where we come into saturated fat, trans fat, cholesterol. I don't know that that's super important for you guys to be focused on right now, but cholesterol is something that by law has to be on a nutrition label. Sodium as well. High sodium items, you kind of want to avoid those, like super, super high ones, and that's going to come in a lot of prepackaged food, right? Because again, salt, fat, and sugar make things taste really good. They also help prolong the shelf life of something. So, and I actually look a lot at this percentage, and we'll talk about a little bit of that, but The percentage is really important there on the sodium, because you don't want something that says it's going to be 50% of your daily intake of sodium. Guys, that's a lot. You want to keep that on the lower end. Obviously, we still have to have salt. We still have to have sodium for our body to process food and to digest and to grow and to have energy to do things with, right? But you do want to make sure you limit that a little bit. Total carbohydrates, again, I will tell you, carbohydrates are not bad. They are not the devil. Hopefully I can be the one to tell you that. So much of mainstream media is anti-carb and anti-fat and anti-calorie. Guys, you have to have carbohydrates for your brains to grow and to move and to have energy. Again, all of this goes into supporting a healthy, active lifestyle. The thing is, you just don't want to eat a ton of carbohydrates. Everything in your intake during the day should not be carbohydrate based, right? Because there are other things that need to go into a healthy, balanced diet. But total carbohydrates are going to be fiber and sugars all added up, because fiber and sugar is what creates a carbohydrate. So we are going to take a look at that number, and that's 28 grams. But if you notice, this is, there you go, less than 1 gram of dietary fiber. Guys, fiber is really, really important. Fiber is what helps slow down your digestion so that your body can actually use the nutrients that you're putting into it. It also helps regulate a lot of your gut health things, right? It also gives you energy, metabolism, all that good stuff. Total sugars, we want to make sure that we're very, very, very mindful of this number. And we're going to talk a little bit more about sugars here in just a minute. But total sugars are really, really important. And total sugars are going to be an addition of natural sugar. So when we think of natural sugars, we think of fruits and carbohydrates, grains. Those kind of things have natural sugars. But we also want to be super mindful of added sugars. Added sugars are the stuff that, again, makes you want to keep coming back for more, because our brains and our bodies get addicted to sugar. They're no different than any other drug. And sugar, while your body, there's nothing wrong with having some sugar. Having too much sugar affects your entire body. It affects your brain. It affects your everything. Every internal organ is affected by sugar. So we definitely want to be mindful of that. And again, we'll talk a little bit more about that. And again, we're going to notice that this box has some protein in it, has 2 grams of protein. So all of these numbers, guys, are dictated by what's in the ingredients. And that's why, as a nutrition professional, I find it most important that we focus down here. And I've got a lot of examples today that we're going to draw from. But this stuff is really important to notice, but we need to notice where that stuff's coming from. Because a lot of times, things that are billed as healthy foods, when you really get down into them, and yeah, the nutrition facts look really good, but maybe it says 0 sugars added, and you're like, yeah, that's awesome, I'm eating so healthy. But when we go to the ingredients, we find that there's a lot of artificial sugars in there. There's a lot of artificial flavors. And guys, that kind of stuff changes your body chemistry. And that's not the way our bodies were meant to digest and process and use nutrients, is with a lot of added stuff. It slows down our metabolism, slows down all kinds of body processes that need to happen. And so in order to most efficiently use the nutrients that we're putting into our bodies, we need to make sure that we're choosing items that are the least processed available, right? It doesn't mean you can't enjoy highly processed foods as treats, but guys, we do need to use those as treats and not as everyday items, because everyday items tend to become habits that as adults, then you kind of want to reverse those habits, and that's not going to be helpful, right? It's just a lot of added work in the end of it. I think when we're super young, we think, oh, it doesn't matter what I eat. I can eat whatever I want. But all of those things, and I know as an adult, it's me saying this, the warning. As an adult, you have consequences for your behavior as a younger person. But it's true. And I know, it stinks. It's no fun to hear about that kind of stuff, but it is true. And so the more that you can do now as a young adult and, as an older teenager, the better off you're going to be in the end. And I realize that's hard to conceptualize right now, but hopefully I can just help you be an informed consumer so that as you grow in age and as you get older and as you have children and as, life goes on, you're an informed consumer for life, Okay. So back to some packaging. The other thing that's really important is ingredients. Guys, ingredients are so important. That's what makes the food. You cannot just focus on the nutrition facts and labels and make your choices off of that. Guys, that's very 1980s and before. It was like, oh my gosh, we have these nutrition facts. These are so important. I need to make all my decisions based on the nutrition facts. And then food manufacturers, because remember their goal is to sell you a product, are doing all kinds of junk in the ingredients that you aren't even noticing. So you're putting things into your body like antibiotics that you didn't even know existed. And that hashtag shredded cheese. Shredded cheese has antibiotics added to it because it's a mold inhibitor. If you don't want to be putting antibiotics in your body that needs the bacteria, then perhaps you would choose a block of cheese rather than pre-shredded cheese. Okay, let's talk about ingredients, you guys. I have kind of a selection of things from the super highly processed end to the less processed end. Ideally, in a great and ideal world, we'd all pick items that are very low processed, meaning fruits, vegetables, meats from the meat department, that kind of thing, those whole grains, those things that are readily available that you can just buy loose. They aren't going to have an ingredients list, guys, because when you go to the store and buy a banana, hopefully you're just buying a banana. Hopefully when you go to the store and you're buying broccoli, you're just buying broccoli. You're just consuming broccoli. But when we start, I mean, obviously nobody exists, the majority of us anyway, don't exist on zero processed food, right? Or low processed food. We have some pantry staples in our house. We're going to have things that are higher on the process list. We just kind of want to bring that processing level and those added ingredients way down, right? Okay. So this Skippy Natural Creamy Peanut Butter. We're going to talk about the ingredients a little bit here. In this is roasted peanuts, sugar, palm oil, and salt. So let's talk about the way that we make peanut butter. If you were to want to make peanut butter at home, what would you do? You would get raw peanuts, you would spread them on a sheet, and you would roast them because roasted peanuts taste better than raw peanuts. So what goes into roasting? Typically when you roast something, like think of if you're roasting a vegetable, what do you do to it? You put a little oil, that's fat, and you put a little salt on it. You might put some seasonings if you're doing a vegetable, but for the illustration of peanut butter, you're going to put oil and you're going to put salt on it. But guys, sugar. Again, if you've had, there's so many different varieties of peanut butter in the store, right? You've had like super healthy natural peanut butter that you're grinding in yourself in the Whole Foods department, right? And then you're going to have shelf-stable peanut butter. Guys, again, peanut butter, what is keeping it on the shelf, what makes it a non-perishable is the fact that it has a lot of salt and a lot of sugar in it. So if you were to go on the low processed end of this, you're going to get stuff that has like peanuts and maybe a little bit of oil in it, or peanuts and salt. The taste is going to be different, guys. And then maybe it's an acquired taste, especially if your taste buds are very used to having stuff with a lot of added sugars and salts and oils in them. But the sugar, salt, and oil is, or the sugar and the salt anyway, is what makes this able to be able to sit on the shelf for a long time. So that is going to be in that. So those are the only ingredients in it, which is good. It doesn't have a ton of added colorings or preservatives or anything like that. So that's the reason it can say natural, is because it doesn't have any artificial ingredients in it. But we do need to be mindful that the sugar that's reflected in these nutrition facts, and this has 3 grams of added sugar. The oil, this is going to have 3.5 grams of saturated fat. And the salt, it has 150 mgs of salt, aren't too high, because that's when you go and you look at 500 different brands of peanut butter and you start looking at those and seeing what all is actually in your food, right? So let's go back to the sugar here, because that's something like, if I can impart this into everybody that I come across in my business, I really want them to understand one thing. So when you go home, take a teaspoon. I wish I had it with me right now, shoot. But if you could take a teaspoon and scoop out white sugar and level it off, that's 4 grams of sugar. So this right here has 3 grams of sugar per serving. So 3 grams of added sugar. So if you were to be making peanut butter at home, you've got your peanuts, you've got your oil, you've got your salt, and now it's time to add your sugar. You wouldn't add the sugar during the roasting process. You would add the sugar after it's all blended up to make it taste good and to make it last longer, right? So when you look at this label, you're like, oh, 3, that's not so bad, right? Well, let's go back up to the serving size. 2 tablespoons. 2 tablespoons of this peanut butter. Remember, for every gram of sugar, that's that's half, or that's 1, let's see. This is where my math, I need to go to math class, you guys. So if 1 teaspoon of sugar is 4 grams and this has 3 grams, that's for every 2 tablespoons, it's almost got a whole teaspoon of that 2 tablespoons is sugar. Again, just something to be mindful. We do want to stick to lower added sugars. Let's go back to this. So let's look at the sugars on this. This has got 8 grams, right? So for 1/6 of this box, we've got 8 grams of sugar. That's 2 teaspoons. So you've made your pan of cornbread, right? Because this is cornbread mix. You made your pan, you've sectioned it off into 6 pieces, and imagine that every one of those 6 has 2 teaspoons of sugar. Just something to be mindful. Again, you want to pick on the lower scale. Okay, let's look at our next item, Honey Nut Cheerios. So this is a very American staple in lots and lots of houses. So again, we've got our cute marketing up here, large size, more for your money, lower cholesterol. Again, always make sure to look at that little asterisk because that will tell you a lot. But all of these ingredients and vitamins and minerals and all of that. We're going to talk about that a little bit too, because we're going to go down to this ingredients list. So let me read this to you. It's got whole grain oats, sugar, that's the number 2 ingredient, oat bran, cornstarch, honey, brown sugar syrup, salt, tripotassium phosphate, canola oil, natural almond flavor, vitamin E, and which is added to preserve freshness. Then we have vitamins and minerals, calcium carbonate, zinc and iron, vitamin C, vitamin B, vitamin B6, vitamin B2, vitamin B1, vitamin A, vitamin AB, vitamin B12, and vitamin D. Okay, that's a lot of ingredients in one little bowl of cereal, isn't it? Okay, so let's talk about another thing with this ingredient list. So by federal regulation, ingredients must be listed from the most prevalent item in the ingredient down to the least prevalent item. So again, let's go back to our kitchen illustration with the peanut butter. If we're going to list this, we have to see what's the first ingredient. What's the first ingredient in peanut butter? Roasted peanuts. That's good. The next most prevalent ingredient in this, the next most thing in here is sugar. The one after that is palm oil. The one after that is salt. So we're looking at, as a food manufacturer, how much of each thing are we adding in, and then we have to list them in order on our ingredient list. So ingredients, the first most prevalent item in this is whole grain oats. We always want to look for whole grains, not whole wheat. Whole wheat really doesn't tell us very much. We want to look for whole grain because that's the whole grain. That's a whole separate lesson. But the second most prevalent item in this is sugar, you guys. The third is oat bran. The fourth is cornstarch. The fifth, honey, which is sugar. The sixth, brown sugar syrup, also sugar. Salt, tryptopotassium phosphate, and da-da-da-da-da-da, and on and on and on. So with that said, just by looking at this ingredients, we're probably going to see a fairly high level of sugar per serving in this item. So again, to be mindful, this has 9 grams of sugars in it, 9 grams of sugar. And so that's going to be 2 teaspoons per serving. And let's see, a serving is a 3/4 cup. When's the last time that you measured out your cereal when you poured it into a bowl? How many servings were you probably having? Probably 2 or more. I've seen some people that are like, they're just pouring it all in the bowl. So you've got to times that then by how many servings. So it's like, oh, well, that's not that bad. Till you realize what you're having for breakfast is, I don't know, 8 teaspoons of sugar. You wouldn't typically eat that, or maybe you would, but you shouldn't typically eat 8 teaspoons of sugar. So being mindful of our serving size and the ingredients, very, very important. Okay, let's move on to this. These are my favorite chips. Get them at Costco. They're so yummy, and they are made of whole food ingredients. Again, they're not made of a bunch of different random names of chemicals that were manufactured in a laboratory and put into a box. These are actual food items. So let's see, rice flour, chickpea flour, dried green peas, sunflower oil, dried black beans, dried purple sweet potato, cane sugar, so it does have a little sugar in it, sea salt, calcium lactate, salt, vegetable juice, and mixed trophenols, which is an antioxidant. So then with all that said, sugar is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th item on the list, whereas sugar is the 2nd item on this list. Sugar is the 2nd item on this list. So you're going to understand that there's a whole lot less sugar in something like this rather than something like this. So, and I can imagine some people are like, that's so gross. They're actually really, really good. But something to take note of, again, the dietary fiber that's going to come in from using the whole bean rather than just the inside of the bean. Because again, remember, all food is made up of lots of different parts. Peanuts aren't just peanuts. There's an outer shell, an inner inside, all of that kind of thing. Okay, let's talk about bread. Bread is super, super popular, right? Like everybody in America eats sandwiches. So this is the bread that our family uses because I really like the ingredients in it. So let's see, ingredients. Whole grain, whole wheat flour, water, organic grain and seed mix, organic pumpkin seeds, flax seeds, oats, barley, sesame seeds, sunflower seeds, organic rye, organic millet, yellow corn, brown rice, sugar cane. So we're way down here in that list before we even see sugar, which I'm going to show you an opposite of this in another one. Whole wheat organic vital wheat gluten, whole wheat flour, raisin juice, canola oil, sea salt, yeast, vinegar, blah, 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 blah. Okay. So that's one type of bread, right? We had a barbecue this weekend and my husband went and bought white bread hamburger buns. Let's read the ingredients on this. First ingredient, flour, which is wheat flour, malted barley, niacin, iron, thiamine mononitrate, riboflavin, folic acid, water. So we're going to make this bread. We're going to make this specific bread right here, not this specific bread right here. This specific bread, if we were going to whip this up ourselves, we need to start with the most amount of flour, which makes sense because we're eating a baked good, right? And then we're going to add some water, and then we're going to add sugar. The third ingredient on this list, the third most prevalent thing in this hamburger bun is sugar. Why? It's going to make it shelf stable. This is going to mold faster, but is it better for your body in the long run? This is going to mold slower because it's got a higher content of sugar and salt. And then soybean oil yeast contains 2% less of the following: wheat, gluten, salt, sodium, blah, 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 blah. Then we go into calcium propionate, malted barley syrup. Oh, another source of sugar. Calcium sulfate, ammonium sulfate, monoglycerides, sodium, sterol, lactate, and absorbic acid. Y'all, this is a lot of preservatives and a lot of chemically manufactured in a laboratory additives in that bread versus this, which is all stuff that comes from nature, right? Again, you may not think that that's like, oh, well, that bread's gross. It's healthy. Well, again, it's made of real food, which our body actually knows what to do with and digest. Eating a higher whole food diet is going to lead to less problems in your body overall. Okay, so that's pretty much what I wanted to say about the ingredients. You know, the big hard and fast rule is the less ingredients you can find in something, the better, because then you're going to get a lot less additives, a lot less food colorings. You kind of want to limit those things in your diet. Those are very treat items. And by the way, treats aren't an everyday thing. Remember, treats are special occasion kind of thing. So you're not going to want to go off the deep end and say, I'm never eating red food dye ever again. If you want a Twizzler, enjoy a Twizzler, but understand that it's a treat and not an everyday item kind of thing. You don't want to fill your body with that kind of processed junk, because then we have things like preventable lifestyle diseases, diabetes, high cholesterol, all of those things that you see older people get. It's because they weren't mindful of this stuff when they were younger. Okay, the last thing that I wanted to talk to you guys about is added sugars, because that is a huge issue in food manufacturing today, because we all are starting to become a little more aware of what we're putting into our bodies. But with that said, food manufacturers still want you to buy their things, right? So they've got to be a little more sneaky when they talk about food. So we're going to go back to, actually, let's go back to the buns, the hamburger buns. We saw two different types of sugar in there. Number one, we saw just straight up sugar, which is going to be like your white cane sugar. But then we also saw malted barley syrup. That is something that you need to be very, very conscious of. If you're taking notes, I'd love for you to write this down, because I think that this is really important when you start looking at food packaging and food labels, is to be very aware of what's being put into your food, that maybe you're like, oh, this thing looks really healthy and we're trying to limit our sugar intake because it makes me feel better. It gives me more energy to not be shoving sugar down my throat constantly. But you need to understand that sugar is probably the number one thing. It used to be fats, but people kind of got smart about that. And so now it's sugars that food manufacturers are being sneaky about, because they want you to buy their food. And if they put extra sugar in it, you think it tastes good, then you continue to buy it more and more and more, and their pockets get bigger and bigger and bigger. So it has syrup. So anything with the last part of the word is syrup. Corn syrup, rice syrup, malted barley syrup, honey. We're going to go into a couple more of those in just a minute. But those syrups are sugar. Anything that says sugar, anything that says syrup, just read it as sugar. Anything with the words that end in ose, O-S-E. So examples of that would be fructose, sucrose, maltose, dextrose. All of those, sugar. And anything with sugar in the name, so raw sugar, cane sugar, brown sugar, confection sugar, anything like that. Other examples of added sugars are fruit nectars, concentrates of juices, honey, agave, molasses, all of that kind of thing is all sugar. So just because it doesn't say sugar in the ingredient list, you need to make sure that you're being aware of other things that it says that technically are all adding into that sugar anyway. So these two things, just to wrap us up here, ingredients should coincide with nutrition facts. You can look at the nutrition facts, but be sure you're referencing the ingredients so that you know where those protein grams came from, so that you know where those carbohydrates came from, so that you know where those calories came from, you guys. Calories are an important part of your intake. You have to have calories in order to function, right? You can't just eat 0 or very low calorie foods. Everyone who's growing and moving and having a life has to have calories, has to have carbohydrates, has to have protein, has to have fat, or else we end up with a lot of bad things that we don't want to maybe go into today. So hopefully that was really helpful to you guys. I hope that this helps you become a little bit more informed about the ingredients in your food and maybe what's going into those foods, and just being a little more cognizant of the packaging of something doesn't always tell you what the nutrition facts and the ingredients tell you. Those two things are the most important things to look at on a package. So always when you're shopping or you're looking in your pantry, this is facing out. Always turn it to this side so that you can see what's really going on inside of it. So hope this was helpful for you guys. I hope everybody has a great day.